I'm Ken Dunn, and this is Bestseller Confessions. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today best-selling authors have an unfair advantage with their traditional publishers and their mega publicity and marketing budgets. It's just not fair. As a major crime detective and a police interrogator, I know how to get them to spill the beans. In the Bestseller Confessions podcast, I'll squeeze the secrets out of the best-selling authors and finally level the playing field for everybody. My next interrogation is waiting for me, so let's get started. Now, Bob and his co-author, John David Mann, have created one of the most epic business sales books. It is a proverbial Bible. And The Go-Giver has become a franchise because of its mix of business principles, its incredible writing style, and the wonderful story it tells. So today, Bob and I are going to talk about The Go-Giver and how he has been on over 1,000 radio and podcasts and how he's used that to turn The Go-Giver into a franchise. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining us here.
Oh, my pleasure. I love the work you do. And I love the passion you have behind it. And I just love how you want to serve your members. I just so honored to be with you.
I remember I had a a podcast I was doing for a while. I still have it. I have a podcast called Ken Dunn Bestseller Training. And I had you on that show and we talked about podcasting, and you said something to me that was really impactful. You told me that you've never turned down a podcast as long as it's congruent with you and your life, and you'll do them even if there's only going to be one person show up. Let's jump right into this, Bob. Tell people about you and the Go-Giver and that strategy.
Well, as far as that's concerned, Ken, I think there are a couple of reasons for not turning down a podcast, especially when you're starting out. But again, I've kept it going through now 9 years, 9.5, a little over 9 years of having the Go-Giver out. We still do interviews on this particular book, even though I've had others out since then. We still do it on this particular book. It never stops. And yeah, as long as there's one person listening, I'll do it, because you just don't know who needs to hear that message, who wouldn't otherwise. And you never know who's listening that leads you to a whole bunch of other podcasts or opportunities or sales or what have you. Yeah. I think it's also good when you're first starting out with a book. Just get on as many as you can to practice your rap. Okay, practice your sound bites and practice your points that steer the conversation in the direction you want it to go. Practice doing all those things that make you a better interviewee. Because remember, and we'll probably talk about this later, your number one job as a guest is not to sell your book. Your number one job is to make the host look good for having you. Because remember, their listeners aren't interested in your book. They're interested in the value that you can provide. And if you develop the reputation as being easy to work with, and as my friend Joe Calloway, author of some wonderful books, including Be the Best at What Matters Most, as he says, do the thing right that you're supposed to do, right? Absolutely. If you get the reputation for that, you're going to get lots of people emailing you and calling you. They want you to be on their show because they heard you were a great guest.
Let's rewind a bit. I'd love to have our listeners, our attendees, learn about the Go-Giver franchise. And I know there were other books before and afterwards, but there's just so many lessons in that book. You and John Mann had the idea to write this book. Tell us about that, where the idea came from, so that our students, if you will, can understand that process. Sure. And of course, I'd love to know, did you really think when you started that it was going to become the franchise that it is today?
Okay, so those are great questions, and I think the lead up into anything is important. Years and years ago, Ken, this is back in the mid-'90s, I had a book out called Endless Referrals, Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. It was a how-to book on how people who are in sales, people who are entrepreneurs, who believed in what they did, they knew they provided great value, but they weren't comfortable with the process of finding new, highly qualified prospects. They weren't comfortable with asking for referrals. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they were, as Michael Gerber would say, technicians maybe, right? But they weren't people who considered themselves to be salespeople. They didn't find that process to be something appealing to them and comfortable. So the whole book was on how to really gently and comfortably go out there and meet new people in a way that not only was comfortable for them, but comfortable for you to be able to go out there and do that. And the main premise of the book was that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. It was a how-to book. It's sold over, I think, about 300,000 copies now in the years that it's been, and it's had a few revised editions. Successful book, but a how-to book. Well, throughout the years, I always read a lot of parables. I'm a book fanatic. I love books.
Right.
Okay, so I'd read parables starting with Og Mandino's greatest salesman in the world, and Klassen's Richest Man in Babylon, and all those the Wealthy Barber, and back in the, I think, late 70s, early 80s, Doctors Blanchard and Johnson with the 1 Minute series.
Right.
1 minute manager, 1 minute salesperson, 1 minute apology, 1 minute lots of them, lots of great, and they were all wonderful. You could read them in an hour or 2 hours, and the stories connect, and you felt you really took something away. So I thought, wouldn't it be a neat idea if we could take the basic premise of endless referrals, the all things being equal, and turn that into a parable? So I sort of just asked myself, okay, so when we talk about the know, like, and trust, how do you develop that? Well, in a nutshell, you give value to everyone you meet. Your focus, you move from an I focus or me focus to an other focus, looking for ways to bring value to others. So kind of came up with the name Go Giver, because out of giving value, and wrote a very, very simple, sketchy little outline, which went nowhere. But I began to write it. And within about a minute, I came to a realization, Ken. There is a huge difference between writing a how-to book, which pretty much anyone can do. Write down what you know.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a big between that and writing a work of fiction, which the Go Giver was going to be. And I really knew that it was not just outside my comfort zone. I'm not worried about that. But as John Maxwell later said to me, it was outside your strength zone.
Right.
And I knew it was. So there was a guy I'd never met him in person, but he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for every month. His name is John David Mann. And while you can walk into a bookstore now and there'll be 5 or 6 New York Times best-selling books that John has either co-authored or ghostwritten or whatever, back then he was known only by a specific niche. Now the people who knew him knew how brilliant he was.
Right.
Okay. And fortunately, I was one of them, and I knew. So I asked John, and when I say I asked, I mean I pleaded with John to be the lead writer and storyteller of this little idea. So he was very busy at the time. But as he later told me, he went back to Anna, his fiancée at the time, now his lovely wife, and he said, I'm really too busy to do this, but, it's Bob. I mean, how can I just not at least take a look at it? Well, there goes that know, like, and trust relationship part, right? It's only because of that. So they were visiting her mom, who was living in Tampa at the time, and what they did is they came across the state. I live in Jupiter, north of West Palm Beach. They took a special trip, and we had about a 4-hour dinner that night, and the three of us just talked about how we envisioned the possibility of the book, because he still had not agreed to it. About 3 weeks later, he called me and he said, I think we've got something there. And I just very coolly, okay, thank you, John. Well, we'll, talk and get together and blah, blah, blah. After the hung up, and I'm like, yes, he's going to do it. And because I knew John could really bring to this thing a dimension I could not. Now, what the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would have said, for those of us old enough to remember him, was that the book got turned down by like 26, 27 publishing houses.
Wow.
It's not that it just got sold right away. We had a wonderful agent. We have the same agent who sold Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson's books, the 1 Minute series. Wonderful, fantastic agent. But it took a good year and a half until we found the right publisher, until they found the right publisher, which is Portfolio, Penguin Random House. And they have been such a wonderful publishing partner. We consider them, all of us are part of Team Go Giver, right? The writers, the editors, the publisher, the agents, it's a team effort. And so that's really how that happened. And so the first one, the Go Giver, sold well. And from there, the franchise kind of took off.
But you didn't leave it up to portfolio to sell these books. You know,
Oh,
you're a
no.
consummate salesman anyway, so there was a real partnership there, and I think I want to focus on that for a minute, Bob, because I believe that that is the reason the Go Giver has become a franchise today. Because they're, you know, Portfolio, Penguin, traditional publishers, they publish hundreds of thousands of books a year, and you're in the 1% of the 1%. So let's talk about the author side of supporting the success of a book.
So often, Ken, and I know this happens with you all the time, that someone says, okay, so I'm going to write this book. That's the toughest part, getting it written and published. The publisher will sell it for me, right? They'll put me on this tour and they'll take care of. No, that's not their job. And I don't care whether it's you've got it self-published, independently published,
Hybrid published, traditionally published.
published through a traditional publisher. Your job is to sell the book, not the publisher's. Now, our publisher is extremely supportive, and they're wise, and they're wonderful. And I'll tell you, when John or I, when we have a promotion we want to do, because we do plenty of them to get the book out, I'm telling you, they are fantastic. But their job is not to sell the book. That's our job. And so yes, if you're listening to this and you're writing a book, I'm telling you, it can be the greatest book in the world. But unless you're willing to go out there and do the work and really treat the book selling and marketing part as a business in and of itself,
Right.
you could be disappointed. Now, I've heard a couple of times, a couple of books that supposedly, and this is just, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is just what I've heard, that a couple of books were never marketed. It just happened to be word of mouth. I heard that the book The Power of Now and Richard Bach's original book, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. I heard the authors never did anything with that. It just caught on. Those are the only two books I've ever heard of. And again, I don't know if that story's true or not, but those are the only two I've heard of that had no marketing behind it.
Right.
It just caught on word of mouth.
But there's a million
There's
a million books published every year, so you're talking 2 out of a million.
Right. And I'll tell you, some of the best books out there that have ever been written are most likely sitting in someone's garage.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's a travesty, but we'll talk about that later.
Yes, it is, because they had value to share with the marketplace and it didn't get out there.
So the important aspect here is the thousands of people that are taking this course, they're taking it because a lot of them are frustrated because their books aren't selling. And in the previous modules that we go through, we talk about the fact that how a book is published is really not relevant anymore, because if you look at the million that were published last year, 65% of them were published by self-publishers or hybrid publishers, relationships where the author is paying to play, but the author also gets the lion's share of the royalties, 70% versus 10%. And now the lines are so blurry because even hybrid self-publishers can get books into bookstores and all the rest of it. But the principle that we were just talking about, that you are the ultimate example of, is it doesn't matter how the book was published. It's up to the author to ensure the success of it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So you've got to have a plan, and you've got to stay with that plan. You know, the two best examples of that are Mark Victor Hansen and Jack Canfield from Chicken Soup of the Soul. We all know the story about their being turned down by 150 or 2 or whatever it was, publishers. But here are a couple of guys who just made a decision. They made a decision they were going to do what it took, you know, as long as it's always the disclaimer, as long as it's legal, ethical, and moral. And they just went out and they did 5 things every day. I think the book, John Kremer's 1001 Ways to Market Your Book, I think they took 5 things, 5 steps out of that book. And every day they would just do something from those 5. And they did it consistently, and they did it consistently, and they did it consistently. Key word here, consistently, and until the book took. And then they did it more and more and more, and they built, of course, a brand, you know, pretty good brand off of that.
Absolutely.
But that's really what it is. I mean, there's nothing. You know, I don't think there's anything magical I'm really going to even share this morning that probably most people haven't heard. Maybe a few things that not everybody hears, but I think most of it is pretty commonsensical. But it's a matter of being willing to do the work and promote that book.
I want everybody to know that even the likes of the Go Giver franchise, there were mistakes made.
Oh,
There were things that didn't go right. And, we in the book world know of your success. We know of the incredible work that you did with John David Mann. And then, of course, the dozen books afterwards and the online writing, or excuse me, sales college university. But I'm sorry to do this, but I need you to lift the kimono.
okay.
What was the biggest mistake made with the Go Giver
Oh,
franchise?
that's easy, actually. Well, when the Go Giver started to sell, and it did take off quickly, more quicker than it usually would, than a book usually would, and we're very fortunate with that. And we just again kept you know kept doing the interviews and kept doing what it. And then the publisher signed us to a deal for 2 more books. One was Go Givers Sell More. Now that was more the application aspect of the Go Giver, so a little bit more how-to-ish. Go Givers Sell More, and again, that one fortunately did well. We went back to it, and we went back, and I would do interviews with the people who'd interviewed me before, and we'll talk more about how to set that up later. But so that worked out well. But then the third one, okay, was going to be another parable, and it was going to take place in the same town, same fictional town, with a couple of the same characters making and a few references, so it would be fun to for people who'd already read the book, but you didn't have to have read the first book to be able to benefit from the third one. We wanted to make it basically about leadership and influence, whereas the Go Giver was more about entrepreneurship. So it was just a little bit different angle. So what was the title going to be? Now, the Go Giver was a good title. That was a good sellable title. So in coming up with the title for this, we could not decide whether to include the Go Giver name within it or make it so it hinted toward Go Giver, but wasn't quite, it wasn't in the name. And so what finally happened was, It's Not About You was the title. Now, the reason why was because law number 3 of the Go Giver, the law of influence, says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Or not in a way that makes you doormatty or a martyr or self-sacrificial, but in a way that benefits everyone. In a way that when you're focused on bringing value to others, that's the key. Well, same in leadership and influence. A great leader, a great influencer, they're not thinking of themselves, they're thinking of those whose lives they're touching. And we figured this was a perfect title for those who love the Go Giver and would immediately grasp the connection. It's not about you, right?
Okay.
Well, how sometimes you're absolutely, totally sure about something, and then you find out you were wrong?
Oh, yeah. Is that ever painful?
People did not buy this book in droves.
Uh-oh.
And when we would ask people afterwards, and we really surveyed, we asked a lot of people why the people who bought it and the people who didn't. And the biggest thing was the title. It's Not About You. And when it comes right down to it, there are 2 things, Ken. One is, well, if it's not about me,
then who?
Why would I be interested? But here's the other thing. The Go Giver, one reason it sold so much is it's because it's a gift book. People buy tens of these, dozens of these, hundreds of these, both in their companies and individually, and they give them to people as a compliment. When you receive a book with the title The Go Giver, it's a compliment. When you give someone a book with the title It's Not About You, it's like giving someone a bottle of mouthwash.
A kick in the pants.
It's not about me.
What is he trying to say
right?
about me? Oh,
the title
goodness.
was awful. So we went back to the publisher, and we asked them to do something that a publisher rarely does. We asked, could we change the title? And we'll update it a tiny bit, but really it was the title that was changed, and put it within the Go Giver brand. And they said yes. Again, they're a great publisher. And we called it the Go Giver Leader. It's been selling beautifully.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's an
You
amazing
can't judge
story.
a book by its cover or its title? Maybe not. but you do anyway.
Oh, I can just imagine. I've probably bought 100 copies of the Go Giver, and I have given them away as gifts to people, and I know the response they get when they receive it. I can just imagine buying a copy of that and sending it off to a friend, and the first thing he sees is it's not about you. My friend would instantly be thinking, "What's Ken trying to say here?"
Yeah, it was a big lesson for us because, again, it always goes back to we are not our customer. We didn't really put ourselves in the mind and the heart of the customer.
Very
We kind of came up with something we thought was clever and something we just assumed would work because, well, we know what we mean, which is exactly the opposite of what we teach in sales, that you've got to discover the other person's wants,
right,
desires, and help them get it. So it was a, it was a mistake.
A very painful one. You get
Yes.
this incredible high off of the Go Giver and the franchise that it's become, and you instantly, you're an author, you've got emotions, you instantly think, man, this thing's gonna, I'm sorry.
Right, exactly. Because Go Givers Sell More also sold well. So we just figured, okay, well, we're on a roll. This is, no, but a great lesson. And it really is a good lesson. We need to always be thinking, and we need to think about it from the other person's point of view, not from our point of view.
Well, it's interesting because that story, and thank you for that, Bob, it is a perfect tie back to a module that we have on branding. We had Liz Benny join us as the co-founder, creator of this course. She's from Christchurch, New Zealand, and she is probably in the top 50 branding experts in the world. And in her training, she actually helps the authors to understand that the message you want to convey is not as important as how it's perceived by the intended recipient.
Boy, she's right on. She's perfect.
I bet you wish you would have had that advice 10 years ago.
Exactly. When we talk about value, okay, and that's a big part of the Go Giver and the law number 1, the law of value.
Right.
And when we define value as being different from price, because price is a dollar figure, a dollar amount. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of something to the end user, as she so expertly said.
Absolutely.
Here's the thing. Value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what we find valuable, not what we think they should find valuable. It's what they find valuable. She's right on the mark. Tell her I love her. That was a fantastic.
Yeah. Well, look, let's talk about publicity and podcasts. Authors, unfortunately, there are a significant amount of less than ethical people out there that are trying to convince authors, unsuspecting authors, to spend tens of thousands of dollars on publicity, on publicists, with the promise that I'll book you on 10 radio shows, and as a result of these 10 radio shows, you'll sell 10,000 books. It's really not about 10 radio shows in a concerted amount of time. It's about making being on podcasts, being on radio, part of your life. It's about laying out breadcrumbs all over the internet, because if somebody doesn't listen to it today, they might in 5 years from now, and all of that counts. Let's get into this now. Where did you first come up with the idea of doing podcasts and radio shows? Now, I know this predates the Go Giver, but I think that's the right place to start with this.
Well, it just basically you look for the medium or the media that will get your message out there. If it was just in the old days, it was radio and television, and that's what you tried to get on. You tried to get on. You tried to book as many regular radio programs as you could. I used to take out ads in the, again, this is way back in the day, in the radio and TV interview report. It used to be called the Bradley Report way back then, Bradley Communications. And you'd take out a half-page ad or a full-page ad. Producers would see you. They'd call, and you'd, again, do the best you can, and you hope you get referrals to other shows. But you just kept, you got list of radio stations. Who's the person? He's the expert that you've had as a guest.
Alex Carroll.
Did the police? Yeah, Alex Carroll. He had a whole thing. We bought his thing of all the list of all the radio stations and all the absolutely. And you dial for dollars. You get your presentation together, and you go after it. You realize you're going to get a lot of no's. And again, that's another, if I may offer this to the people who maybe it's your first book and you don't have a track record yet of being on shows. Expect that you're going to get no's, and don't worry about it. You're going to get the no's.
Keep going. You're not pitching your book, but you're pitching things that are relevant to the show, and
they get
a chance to do that, which I know is part of your secret.
They're not interested in your book. they're
Right.
interested in bringing value to to their audience.
But they are going to say, I now have on my show Bob Berg, the co-author of the Go
Oh, you will
Giver.
still, sure. Oh, you'll still promote your book. There's ways to do it and ways not to do it, though. You know, when you do things like when they say, well, how do you, or what are the 5 ways to so and so so and so, and you say, well, I can't really say all that here, but if you get my book, that's going to get you blacklisted from from every show that you want to be on. No,
Right.
your job is to provide wonderful, great information. You'll have a chance to promote your book. They'll ask you.
Yeah, and if you do the right job with the host, and as you said, if you make the host look good and you make the host feel good, they're going to promote your book for you.
Absolutely.
Let's get into podcasts, Bob. Over 1,000 podcasts in the last decade to support your platform in the Go Giver. I don't even know where to start with it. It's so awesome because I know how you are as a guest. Where did you first realize that podcasts were something that could be focused on, that could be a very viable part of a marketing strategy? And let's talk a little bit about your philosophy around doing these shows.
Well, I think as soon as I saw that podcasts were a thing, that's when I started doing them. And that's when I started to, present to them the idea of having me on the program. Again, getting that one sheet, getting endorsements and blurbs from again, producers and hosts who had me on their show. Why do we do that? Well, we've all read Dr. Cialdini's book, Influence, and we know about social proof. My friend Joe Polish, who's one of the best direct response marketers in the world, one of the best copywriters in the world. I love what he says. He says, what other people say about you is infinitely more believable than what you say about you, so let other people say it. So I'm a big believer in having testimonial endorsement blurbs on the page. And so I'd send that with some bullet points of what, and then suggested questions. Now we do this now online. Okay, we send them we include a link once we have something booked. But when we're going after it at first, you've got to put that right there for them to see it, because they're not going to we can't expect them to do the work.
Right.
To take that next step. But we always want to make it easy for them to book us on their show, which means that they feel there's no risk. That's one reason why I like to include endorsement blurbs. We want to give them the bullet points, which are going to show the benefits that their listeners will receive from the interview itself. We want to give them the suggested questions and talking points. Make it easy for them to be a star. Make it easy for them to shine. And they're going to appreciate that because they're busy. They want to do as less work as possible. So the more easy you make it for them to book you on the show, the better the chances are you're going to be on the show.
There's really no secret in the beginning. Find the podcasts. Listen to podcasts. When you become a listener of them, become a consumer of them, and find the ones in your space just by simply Googling podcasts on sales.
Exactly.
And then when you reach out to these people, consume their content first.
Yeah.
Get to know them first. It really goes right back to the Go Giver philosophies. Is this some of the ideas that you did? Let's talk about your approaching in the beginning when you were actually, because I know you don't even have to approach them now, but back when you did.
Right. No, and that's okay. Right now, no, we don't need to, but we did for many years. We did. And and that's okay too. And everyone, listen, will get to the point that they start calling you and emailing you. And that's a great place to get to, but it takes a lot of work to get there.
Right.
And so, I would definitely listen. I'd listen to a couple of back episodes and kind of get to know them. I'd always read their bios. I'd do a search on them. Now, that was, again, before the internet really took off, back in the old days of the 90s, right? That was
when you had to go to a library to find information.
Right. But now, no, that's not that. It's so much easier now. There's really no excuse for not knowing at least a surface bit and a little bit deeper about the show, about the host. You know what I'm saying? It's really at this point so easy to do.
What are some of the things that come to mind that an author can do if they're trying to approach or get in with a podcaster and get themselves on the show?
They're always looking for good guests. So yes, there are a lot of people who want to get on the show, but they're always looking for good guests. And again, I would say don't try to get on the huge podcasts first. Play small at first. Again, really get your rap together. Get some great testimonial endorsement blurbs. Get things together so you just have it really down so that you know what you want to say, so you get adept at pivoting when you're asked something that you really don't want to be asked, that doesn't add to the value, and you need to be able to bring it back to where all those things are very good to do. And remember, as you start doing those, it won't be long until you start getting people calling you. You can also let the host or the producer, especially when it's smaller, usually the host is the producer, but you can also let the host know that you'd love to, if they would be willing to refer you to others that might be interested. Another thing I always did, and I still do, is after I'm interviewed as a guest, I write a handwritten thank you note to the host and producer. I have my own note cards. They're 8.5 by 3 inches. They're on a little bit, it's 80 to 90 pound cardstock, and they're not postcards. They go in an envelope, but I just write a note in blue ink, and it's just, "Hi, Dave," or "Hi, Mary. Thank you again for having me on your show. You're a terrific host. I enjoyed myself immensely. Keep up the great work. Best regards, Bob," or whatever it would be. It just depends upon what the. But and a lot of times I'll get thank yous emailed back for the thank you note, and so and I've heard from people say you're the only author who has ever written me a handwritten thank you note after an interview.
Right.
Okay, so what does that tell you? Okay, you can do a simple step like that and separate yourself.
It's interesting, I've been using an online service. My friend Jordan Adler.
Love Jordan.
Yeah,
Great guy.
yeah. Jordan actually got me using his send out card service.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I'm dealing with a new author in my course or my publishing company, they get a card in the mail from me. Now, they're not handwritten. They're all generated online. But you design the card so you can put a picture of them on it.
Exactly.
It's such an amazingly simple system. Mm-hmm. You can put a $5 Starbucks gift card in there. You can even put a pound of brownies in it.
I was just going to say the same thing, right? Because I get those. I actually receive those a lot from people too. And they're the best brownies. They're amazing.
It's so refreshing to hear that you still do those old school things like writing a note and putting it in the mail. And you still really believe that it adds value, and it's a good thing for an author to do when they're interacting with a podcaster.
Absolutely. Also, once you're on a show, you can, when you have, other guests that might add value to this host, ask them if they would like a referral, if they would like an introduction. Now, what I would suggest you don't do is don't do a mutual email introduction and say, "Hey, Dave, this is Jane Smith. She's fantastic, has a great book, she'd make a great guest on your podcast." Because now what you've done is you've put the host on the spot.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would do, where now he has to say, "Well, nah," or, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, great," but doesn't, right? So that has the opposite effect. But you can send an email to this person, or however you're connected on social media, what have you, and said, "I have a great suggestion for a guest if you'd be interested. Her name is so-and-so. This is her information. I can make a connection for you, or feel free to contact her directly." Boom. What you've done is you've added value to him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's get down to the brass tacks of it here, just to make sure that the authors are really getting this. So what we've talked about is to continue to do podcasts. They're easy to discover. They're easy to connect. Do all the right things. Do the things that average people wouldn't do. Use greeting cards afterwards as thank yous. I want to jump into organization, Bob, because we talked about this before the recording, that you are one of the most organized people that I've talked to about this subject. Everything is on a spreadsheet. Everything is correlated properly. And the aha for me is that you're never just going to do one book. So if you organize your life properly, when book 2 and 3 come, you've already got a pre-made list of people ready to help you promote. Where did you come up with the understanding that organization is that important? And tell us a little bit more in detail about what authors should do if they want to get organized.
First, I appreciate your calling me organized, because I'm really not. It's my business partner, Kathy Tagenel, who makes this happen. I am the most disorganized person It's it's crazy. So fortunately, she is very organized. She understands technology. She knows how to make technology work in order to keep the whole thing organized. So because of that, we have created the context where we are very organized. And this is, by the way, from the beginning when we are contacted by a host or a producer, or if we've reached out and they've contacted back and said that they're interested in the booking. We have Kirsty, who's our scheduler. She actually, and that sounds fancy, our scheduler. I mean, it's one of the things she does. But
Sure.
however you do it, if you do it yourself or whatever. Again, I'm just not that good at doing it. It's
Sure.
easier for me to, you know what I'm saying? So Kirsty sends an email to them confirming the date, time, or reaching out to set one if that's what we need to do. She sends them the link that has the information, the basic premise of the interview, a suggested title for it. And again, we always let them know this is for your benefit. Feel free to utilize or delete whatever makes or doesn't make sense. My bio and intro, the suggested questions, talking points, graphic of the book, my generic photo. So everything they would want to do is totally easy for them to do.
Right.
Okay? But now it also gets put into a spreadsheet where we know the host's name, the producer's name, their basic audience, because that's important. Who is their audience? Obviously, their contact information. What book was Bob interviewed on? So that we know that when we have another book out, and any notes, of course, that must be taken to help our memory for the next time, just in case. And that's really all. I mean, it's not very complicated. It's actually very simple. Now, when I have a new book that's about to come out, we start putting our interviews together. Boom, we take out the spreadsheet and we look through. Is this one appropriate for? Is this one? Is this one? Is this one? Is this one?
Wow.
We send out the letter and we book. They come in. In other words, what I want to stress to people is, do the work necessary to organize, especially if you're someone like me who that's not his nature. Either get people around you who it is their nature, or create some kind of environment where you can do that. Take the time to do that, but then don't make it too complicated.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be complicated. It's more repetition than it is complication.
Because obviously, if you make it too complicated, you're not going to want to.
You're not going to do it. No. So, but it is about repetition, and it is about consistency.
Bob, thank you so much. First of all, for everything you've shared. You've given people a roadmap that if they want to be successful with their books, they just have to follow what you've given them.
Yeah, and these are things I did not necessarily invent. I learned from others. I'm a big believer in not depending upon original thinking. Okay? I don't invent wheels and I don't reinvent the wheels. I learn from people who've come before me, and I think that's the best way to learn, following a system. What is a system when you think about it? I define a system simply as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles.
Absolutely.
The key is predictability, right?
Absolutely.
If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, you know all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired results of B. That's all this is. It doesn't have to be,
so true.
In fact, it shouldn't be complicated. You just need to be willing to do the work. And of course, you have a book. You love the idea of the book. You love the value in your book. You want to share that with others. So it's not like doing these aren't fun. I mean, you're not going to always want to be doing them as many as you might do sometimes, but just keep doing them. And by and large, you're going to love the idea of getting to share this info with people.
Absolutely. And I guess the last thing I want to just make a point on, a little bit of icing on the cake here with podcasting and our time on this part of our session. This is not Life Was Easy for Bob Berg and the Go Giver franchise. This was not Life Was Easy for Ken Dunn and the Greatest Prospector, or any of people has become successful. The commonality you're going to hear in all of these stories is there was a beginning. And in the beginning, Bob Berg was not a franchise. And in the beginning, the Go Giver was not a franchise. There was pain, there was suffering, there was 20-hour days, and there was calling podcasters and getting constant turndowns. And Bob, you didn't stop.
Well, and that's the key. You've got to, and let's face it, nobody, and there's sometimes, Ken, in our business, which is really personal development and the whole thing, there's that, what I call the political correctness of personal development, where we've got to make believe everything is good and everything.
Yeah.
You know what? They'll say, "Oh well, you get no's, you should be glad about them," and I hate no's.
Yeah. Well,
We wouldn't be human if we liked getting no's, but no's are a part of it. My great friends Andrea Wallace,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
and have a wonderful book. It's one of my favorite books of all time, Go for No. And here's their premise, okay? And this is what they say in the subtitle. Yes is the destination. No is how you get there.
Yeah, that's right.
See, I don't think it's getting told no that makes people quit or drives people out of business, Ken. I think it's that they think they're the only ones who are hearing so many no's. They look at the people who've reached a certain level in their business and they think, oh, it just happened for them. Either they got lucky or they got the right people heard it or they got, no. I mean, every so often, once in a blue moon, there's someone who that happens to, I guess.
Yeah.
Has never happened to me. No, we get no's and no's and no's and no's. And it's not that you have to love the no's. You just realize they're part of it.
Yeah.
But that eventually you get those yeses and they start to build and the momentum builds. And, then there's something there.
One yes leads to another. Well, it's funny because I've a couple of times now I've been on vacation with Richard and Andrea, and one I remember one event in particular where we were on a large cruise ship with a couple hundred people, and we had the chance to speak at these events. And even Andrea and Richard told this amazing story about the beginning of Go for No and how tough it was, and how Andrea got sick of hearing no. Mm-hmm. But she kept going. So
Absolutely.
Thanks for that transparency. Look, to everybody that's taken the course, I want to be a blessing to my friend Jordan. You heard Bob and I both loving on him here. So I'm going to put a link below this masterclass at all to his website. It's called sendoutcards.com. I use the Send Out Card service because it's easy. You can go check that out. It's something you may want to take a look at. It's very inexpensive and easy to create these cards. Okay, Bob, I need to talk to you about the Go Giver Sales Academy because I've obviously been a big fan of yours. I've read all of your books, and I know that authors need to understand that they are salespeople inherently. They don't have to be salespeople, but they have to get their story down cold so they can deliver it hot. They have to be willing to speak about their books. They have to connect with people and make relationships to get booked on podcasts. I think the Go Giver Sales Academy is something that every author in the First 1,000 Books community should take. Tell us about it. What is it?
Yeah, it's an ongoing recorded course in which you're really going to see, it's going to make sales for you a lot more fun. It's going to make it a lot less stressful, and it's going to make it a lot more profitable. We're going to tie what you do, and again, it's not for authors, it's for anyone who must sell their product, service, idea. Again, what is selling? Selling is simply discovering what the other person wants, needs, or desires and helping them to get it. So we'll go through the 5 laws, and we do this over multi-weeks, okay? We're going to go through the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity, and help you tie your goal into those 5 laws and how they'll work for you in making your selling just a much nicer, more pleasant, and again, much more profitable process.
Well, it's funny because in the First 1,000 Books course, we talk about sales a little bit in terms of promoting yourself and your brand, how that ties into it, and the importance of you making the calls to the bookstores, to the libraries, to the podcasters, and each one of those really is a sales call. But I love to teach about sales, but I intentionally didn't do a lot of it in the First 1,000 Books course because I really want them to jump over to, I want everybody that's watching this masterclass right now to check out the link to the Go Giver Sales Academy below our masterclass and jump over there and have a look at it. And I would encourage you to consider enrolling in that course because it's going to bring tremendous value to you. Bob, just off the top of your head, what are some of the benefits that somebody that takes the Go Giver Sales Academy and finishes it, because we know that half of people that sign up for online courses never finish them, but the ones that finish it and then employ the principles into their daily activities, what are some of the benefits they'll get out of that?
Well, they're going to feel much more comfortable with the selling process because what they're really going to realize is that people are only going to buy for one reason. And I often, and I'll tell you that what I say this when I speak at a lot of live sales conferences, Ken. I'll say, no one's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. They're
Right.
not going to buy from you because you need the money. And they're not even going to buy from you because you're a really nice person who believes in your product or service. They're going to buy from you for one reason only, because they believe they are better off by doing so
Right.
than by not doing so. The biggest thing you're going to get from this series of classes is how to frame your book or framework. Because remember, it's not just your book, it's all the back end and the different things you're going to be selling after that that's really going to bring in the income for you as well. It's how to frame it in such a way that that person understands that by making the decision to buy what you are selling, their life is going to be better as a result. Too often, people who are not used to sales have an issue with sales because they don't feel comfortable with focusing on themselves, because they know that's not why someone's going to do business with you. We're going to show you how to move from that I focus or me focus to that other focus. And when you do that, how much more fun is it to sell when that person wants to buy from you?
Oh, it's so true. Well, friends, the link to the Go Giver Sales Academy is below our masterclass. Do yourself a favor and check it out. It is a great continuation of what we've done in First Thousand Books. Bob, I truly, truly appreciate you spending the last hour with us and going through your life, really. Some really great reasons for your success. Hey, are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share? We have, like I said, thousands of authors that are going through this course. Is there any last final tip that you'd love to share with these authors that could be a blessing to them?
Yeah, I think, Ken, it really comes down to, if you've got a book, it's because you've got a message, okay? And it's a message you want to share. It's a message that you know in your heart of hearts is of value to others. And the best thing you can do, not only for yourself, but for the world, is to get that message out, whether it's a niche message you have for a niche audience, or whether it's the general audience of readers that are going to benefit from it. The best thing you can do for the world in order to add value to the world is for people to read your book. And to do that, you need to just make a study of how to effectively sell and market your book. So I think that's really all it is. It's making that decision. But, I love what you're doing, Ken. And I just love the consistent value that you focus on bringing to so many people and how you touch so many lives. So thank you again.
You're a good man, Bob. Thanks a lot.
Bestseller Confessions is recorded at undisclosed locations across the United States of America. The names and identities of authors, self-published authors, publishers, and those scoundrel best-selling authors are hidden to protect the innocent.